Now with podcasting, there's no gatekeeper, there's no barrier, there's no one to tell you that you can or can't do something. There's no one to give you a shot or not give you a shot. You have all the keys on your tool belt to make a successful podcast.
This is Paul Stennett, co-founder of podcasting agency Listeners to Clients, who has helped his podcasting clients get over 3 million downloads and hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. In this lesson, we talk with Paul about how he helps his clients, who are mainly business owners, succeed with their podcast.
You have to fall in love with the process. And if you don't love the process, get out now, because it's going to be a very brutal journey.
We learn why podcasts are one of the best ways to build relationship with potential clients.
And we find, based on what the data is showing us, that podcast listeners are several times more engaged buyers than other forms of media.
Why YouTube wants you to create a video podcast.
YouTube's main goal is to get people to spend time on their platform. And if your podcast gets people to spend 2 hours or 3 hours or 1 hour on their platform, your podcast is going to get all the views from YouTube.
Why it's important to test and prove your podcasting tactics before you implement.
It's easier to sell when you know what you're selling actually works for somebody. I'm not the kind of fake it till you make it kind of person. I want to have a conviction that comes from, I've done something and it works.
And he shared something that made me say this. You just described like the most difficult thing to do. Let's make useful content. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Juma, what's up?
I'm good, man. It's good to have you on today. And, I've been trying to get more people from the Caribbean on the podcast. And it's an honor to have someone like you who is a podcaster himself, and not just for yourself, but for other people. So, Paul, could you share with the people what you do and how you help your clients make useful content?
Yeah, so I am a podcaster and I help my clients who are business owners to create podcasts that benefit their business, meaning, they're getting their message out there, they're getting the reach with that, and they're also getting clients in the back end from them talking about their business, building a relationship with their listeners, and then selling them products and services on the back end.
So you are taking over what part of the process exactly? The entire thing? Or do you help people who already have podcasts?
Yeah, so I mainly work with people who have podcasts. We do launch podcasts, but primarily work with people who have podcasts. Usually customers come to us who have been struggling with their podcast in the past. They haven't been getting the views, or maybe the views are not converting into clients. And so we usually take it at that point, and we do everything from, concepts to all the post-production to all the promotion and publishing across like social media, getting them like viral clips for TikTok, Instagram Reels, etc. So really kind of like the full gamut from like start to finish of our podcast episode.
And so that means you're actually involved in producing other pieces of content as well, like short form content.
Yeah, short form content, full length blog posts, videos for YouTube, also the audio that goes on Spotify, etc. Everything. So really, it's a lot. We do a lot for them.
When I think about podcasts these days, initially in my brain, I had podcasts as audio. My business partner and I, when we wanted to start our podcast, which is in process, by the way, is not this one, we were both thinking, we were having a discussion and we were both saying the same word, but it meant different things. To him, it meant by default video. To me, it meant by default audio. And I know last year you made a transition from doing just audio into video. Could you explain what drove that transition?
It's been something that we've wanted to do for a while, but most of our clients at the time were just audio clients, and we were just really primarily focused on getting exceptional audio quality. And we saw more and more clients were thinking about ROI, return on investment. How can I not just have great audio quality, but how can I get more out of my podcast? How do I get more listeners? Or do I have a more impact on the bottom line on my balance sheet? And video was something for me, when I started my podcast all the way back in 2017, that was a big unlock for my podcast growth. Because, we were in Jamaica and Jamaica wasn't a huge podcast destination. There weren't a lot of podcasts. So for me to get my podcast to Jamaican people and also international people, I used video as a way to short circuit that or make a shortcut to growth, and that was very effective for me. So
Mm.
and I've been just kind of working with that behind the scenes, and it wasn't until that's 2022 that I said, there are some clients who have been talking about they want more ROI. Let's actually try to use video for them. And for me personally, this is my personal philosophy. All I've ever wanted to do was to have a basis or have confidence that comes from conviction. Meaning,
Mm.
I'm not the kind of fake it till you make it kind of person. I want to have conviction that comes from I've done something and it works. So anything that I can talk about now on this podcast and anything that I help tell my clients or anything I talk about on social media, it's not from like theory knowledge. Something that I've done, I've experimented with, I've seen results from, and I'm talking from that perspective. So, just practicing video in 2022 and then coming out really big in 2023, I was able to see a lot of gains from my clients and helping them get views and I also get some viral clips across social media. And I can dive into like how we do that or how someone can replicate that for themselves and stuff like that. But yeah, that's sort of kind of like my journey into video and how I've progressed through it.
Yeah, you sound very, very similar to me and my mentality. I have this philosophy where you have to put your hands in the thing and do it. You can't just stand outside of it. You have to put your hands in the thing and massage it
Yeah.
to find out what it's made of, to get a sense of how does this thing actually work. And that's the best way for you to tell someone. So people, and tell me if this is true about you and your company. So people get the best of you because you've done all the work for yourself.
Yes. When it comes to selling, like it's easier to sell when you come from a place of conviction. It's easier to sell when you know what you're selling actually works for somebody. And it might make it, for you and for me, it might make it a bit slower for us to get moving, get clients, or get the growth that we want, because we really have to prove it out for ourselves. Like I've seen and I've received advice from people further ahead in the journey from me, where it's like in your first X amount of years in business, your main priority is selling, and then after
Mm.
you've reached a certain revenue point, then your main priority should change the product. But that has never
Mm.
sat well with me because I'm not going to sell something that I don't believe works. So it may be slow that I'll get the clients, but the clients that I'll get will know that I can deliver on what I promise. I know that I can deliver on what I promise, and what I deliver on what I promise, it's exceptional because I put in the work to get to that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with that. I like that approach. It's not the fastest, but it does give quality when you
Absolutely.
actually give something. That's good. And today we're going to dive into video podcasting, how and why a business should start a video podcast. And this is something that, of course, your company provides. And you believe that businesses are leaving money on the table, or maybe they're not being as profitable as they could be by not adopting a podcast strategy. And you also believe there's nothing better than that to build relationships. Why do you believe that?
Yeah. So let's talk about where I believe podcasts fit in terms of like a marketing hierarchy, right? Because that's kind of like the question that most people would ask. Like, okay, I know about a paid ad strategy. I know about social media, but how does a podcast fit in with all of that? It's just more time and effort into something that may or may not work, or most likely may not
Mhm.
work. So let's talk about where a podcast fits. So I believe a podcast fits in kind of like at multiple levels, but where it really shines in is where it's deepening the relationship with a potential customer. So at the top level, there's attention. You whether you put out an ad or you put out a billboard or you write a book or something, you put something out there on social media or otherwise to get someone's
Mhm.
attention. And then based on that, what do you do with that attention once you get it? You could move directly into a sale, and there's some people who want to move immediately and make a purchase. But then what happens to the 80% of the people or 95% of people who aren't ready to buy? How do you deepen that relationship? How do you keep them in your ecosystem for a very minimal amount of effort? Because so you can write newsletters, you can write blog posts, but then you're gonna have to start from zero again, getting that attention again. Or you can funnel that attention you already have into a podcast. And then week over week on autopilot, you're deepening the relationship with that listener. And we
Mhm.
find, based on what the data is showing us, that podcast listeners are several times more engaged buyers than other forms of media. Now imagine if you are putting out a week an episode 3 times a week. So you someone you do 3 hours. Like my favorite podcast, post an episode 2 to 3 times a week. That is two
Mhm.
to three hours a week. That is more engagement than that person may have with their significant other. Think about that. So that person maybe going to their job 9 to 5. They come home in the evenings and they kind of like get through the night, maybe watch Netflix and go to bed. They're talking to their significant other less than they're actually listening to a podcast. Because they're listening to the podcast on their way to work, on the run, maybe in their lunch break for 3 hours. Imagine how that compounds over years. Then that person is now so engaged that when you put on an offer, when you make a call to action, they're going to respond to it. I see that from my experience, and I see that from my client's experience as well. Just to summarize everything, it's really in deepening that relationship. And then how we take it a step further is we take that podcast and when we repurpose it, we can now talk about using that podcast itself and clips from that podcast to get attention. Then the podcast is there in the middle to nurture that relationship. And then we make calls to action on the podcast that get people in to make a sale. So really, it can potentially exist at all levels of the marketing funnel.
Yeah. There are a couple of things that you said there that stood out to me. The first thing is that the time spent with you, those 3 hours, if you're having, let's just suppose you're releasing a podcast 3 times a week. It's a 1 hour podcast. That means the person is listening to you for 3 hours a week. There are psychological studies that say in order for your relationship to work well as you and your spouse, you have to spend at least 90 minutes of quality time per week. So you're right. I don't know if you knew that,
I didn't know that.
but
I'm gonna use that. That's very good. That's very good.
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I could probably find it somewhere, but when I was doing my own research about content, that was something that came up because I'm big on relationships as well, and we used to shoot weddings back in the day, so that was something that was on our radar. But 90 minutes, I think, is the minimum amount of quality time you can spend with your spouse per week for a healthy relationship.
Nice.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you said, and I want to push back a little bit on this. You said that it's easy or simple, or you said that it's not hard. You referenced it and made podcasting sound easy. Many people would disagree with that. What is your what? How do you tell someone and show them that, and not necessarily try to change their mind, but if they
Mhm.
want to do a podcast, how do you describe it to them in a way that makes them know that this is possible?
Yeah. So the difficult. All right. It's possible to do a podcast. Let's talk about that right away because there's no barrier to entry right now. So when you think about traditional forms of marketing, so let's say for example you have a business and your business does ice cream. If there was no podcast, if there's no tradition, if there's no social media, what you'd have to do is to get your business out there is to put out an ad in the newspaper or to put out an ad and put out a billboard or something like that, or a TV commercial, radio commercial. Those are done by, if 10 people are competing for that ad slot, the price is going to be increased significantly. That might price you out of the opportunity to put your ad out there to get your business visible.
Hmm.
You just can't afford it, and your new business you just can't afford it. Now with social media, now with podcasting, there's no gatekeeper, there's no barrier, there's no one to tell you that you can or can't do something. There's no one to give you a shot or not give you a shot. You have all the keys in on your tool belt to make a successful podcast. And even now today, and even with video, it's even more possible to get found, to get seen, because algorithms are just giving out engagement, they're just giving out views. And so the difficulty is in, can you identify who you're talking to?
Hmm.
And can you talk to them in a way that's engaging to them, that makes them want to listen to you more, and makes them want to resonate, and then that makes them want to buy? So those two things I think are the most difficult parts. Everything else is highly figure outable.
All right, I get you. So you're not saying that because people often think about the technical part. Somehow people go to the technical part of things, which is the easiest part to do. and they don't think about, well, who's my ideal customer, and what is the strategy behind this thing, and what do I want to say, what are the pillars behind those things. They don't think about the actual things that move the needle. They think about, oh my god, I don't have a good mic, which you need to have,
Yeah.
but they don't necessarily go immediately into what are the fundamentals of marketing that I need to apply to this in order for us to get the clients that we want. And I could see why that might be a big challenge for some people, but it's definitely something that can get done. That's what you're saying, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
All right, so good. So we know podcasts can be done. We know you do that for them. One of the things about podcasts, and I guess particularly video podcasts too, that you talk about is the way in which it could be repurposed endlessly. Now, I am as we say in Trinidad and Tobago, a repurposing bantan, and I'm very big on that. Explain to us why that is an important thing about video podcasts.
To record a video is the ultimate unlock because you can use that content so much more. Let's say you're doing audio only. Your only possibilities of repurposing that content is making show notes for a blog post and then maybe making a video where you just do like B-roll on top of the audio.
Hmm.
But when you do video, you have so much more versatility. You can still do the B-roll if you want over the video, over the audio, but you can also use the video so people can see your face and see your expressions. And then you can take one clip, just one clip, one 30-second clip, and turn it into several pieces because you might change the order in which the content is delivered. You might add something in the beginning, and so you can have several different permutations of that one clip. Imagine if you have recorded an hour-long podcast, how many possibilities you have now, just one episode alone to get your content seen and in front of people. That's what I mean when I say it's endlessly repurposable. So not only can you do all those clips and you can do the full video, which goes up on YouTube or goes up on Spotify or whatever. You can then also do, your blog posts and you can do your audio stuff as well. So they're just constant, several potential avenues to get your stuff seen from people who maybe I'm an audio listener only, or maybe I'm a reader. I can't learn by listening. I can learn by reading, or maybe I'm a visual. I have to see something on YouTube. You can meet them anywhere they are and capture that attention.
So are you saying it's important that businesses consider that their audiences consume content in different ways when they are approaching creating their own video podcast?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You want to exist in as many platforms as you believe your ideal listener is. And your ideal listener is a human, like anybody else. So they're probably going to be scrolling TikTok or Instagram. They're probably going to be searching for things on Google. They're probably going to be looking for long form answers to their questions on YouTube or entertainment on YouTube. And you can pop up there at every single place they are. And the more touch points you have, the more that person sees you, the more that they're going to be inclined to say, and it's actually getting harder now. You have to have more and more touch points now than a few years ago. So if you can hit all those touch points, you're going to get that person who's going to be, okay, I see you around now. I want to find out more about you. Let me actually listening to your long form content. I want to
Yeah.
capture that long form content. They're hooked.
Right. And so creating this podcast and being able to repurpose all of these different pieces of content actually lifts the standard of your marketing exponentially. So it's not just approaching this from one channel. Once you discover who your ideal clients are and where they live, and you take the main podcast, right, and you turn that into other forms, it then now lifts your marketing. What opportunities can people expect to see when they start to approach their marketing in that way?
Yeah. So I find it's an easier path to get into your marketing your business or your products and services by using a video podcast. Let's say, for example, you want to create content for your business, and so you have your phone, your camera, or maybe you approach a marketing company. You now have to say, one, I have to script it, so I have to know what's the script I'm going to be delivering on this thing, and it has to be a very good script that's going to get actual views. So there's all that time and effort to workshop that script. Then I have to know perform on camera. I have my camera there. I'm performing. and then know I have to know everything that goes with it. It's standard, right? So one, workshopping my script to make sure it's good enough. Two, I now have to perform on video. I have to write the right clothing. I have to look at have the right camera angles, look at the camera the right way, all that stuff. Performing. Versus if you're doing a podcast, for example, I might just be sitting here talking to a guest or talking to my co-host or talking or just talking, and I have a camera filming me. That's all only difference. I'm doing whatever I'm doing, and that camera is filming me. I'm not performing. I'm just talking, just like you and I are talking right now.
Mhm.
And that podcast can be clipped, or someone can see that, and they can resonate with your message. You're not performing or putting anything on. You're not writing a script per se to say I'm going to deliver these lines. You're just having a conversation about your story, your motivations, your values, or I'm just talking to you as we're doing on this podcast, telling you about what I do and why I think it's important, why I think it's relevant in the world. And in that content now lives here and can live on. So that's why I say it's easy. And it's also a very good way to slide into online marketing or slide into marketing on social media, because as you put out more content, you're getting better and better at public speaking without you even knowing it or being intentional about it. You're just talking. But as you do more of it, you're crystallizing your message, you're distilling it down even further, you're getting better at your story, you're getting better at conveying emotion. All those things are improving just by you sitting here having a conversation and having a camera recording it.
So I think I'm getting what you're saying now. You're saying that the easy part about it is not necessarily, let's just put aside the technical things and all that stuff for the time being. And let's think about you're just having a conversation. You're just talking about things you would talk about every day, except what you're doing now is recording it. And you can take those things and then turn it into something public facing that will benefit and target the people, the ideal clients that you want. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. And all you kind of really have to do is start and not stop. I see a lot of people do.
Ooh, Paul. Oh, go ahead, go
I see a lot
ahead.
of people
Talk to me.
do seasons. Or a lot of people they may start and they just get discouraged because it's not getting the views, or I'm not getting the listeners or whatever, and they stop. But they don't realize that, like, one, everybody has been through this part. Everybody has to put in the time, put in the effort, and eventually something will happen. I mean, there are things that you can do. You might get a viral hit from a clip, and that drives people in and all that stuff. But the if you focus on the craft of it, if you
Mhm.
focus on getting a little bit better at each time, and that's what you focus on. That's what you put your time and effort into. You're going to be surprised when you look up a few months from now of doing it and how much better you are, and the results that you can look at and see, the tangible results that you can look at and see as a result of it to your business. Just start and don't stop.
Yeah. Listen, I think that's the most well. First of all, I know that you're a guy who you don't really believe in seasons for things, right? I know that you don't believe in that. I don't know. I always thought that could be useful, but putting that aside, that is you just described like the most difficult thing to do,
Yeah,
which is to continue.
yeah,
That's all you need to do is continue. That is the most difficult thing to do. How do you prime somebody's mind around that as someone who helps them to produce this piece of content that is critical for their business? And what can a business owner do to prepare themselves for the journey ahead in creating this podcast so that they don't fall off after 7 episodes?
yeah. So I would say 7 episodes is a good test case to see if it's something that you actually want to do. Because at some point in the process, you're gonna have to fall in love with the journey. And if you've been doing it for a while and you're just not falling in love, then you may need to hop out of it. You may need to try something else. Because, like, my favorite podcast, for example, is called My First Million. And I saw them for the first time, and I fell in love with their podcast at the first time when they were 2.5 years in. If they gave up after 7 episodes, I would not know who they are 2.5 years in. There wouldn't be anybody 2.5 years in. They wouldn't be now making millions of downloads. They just celebrated 100 million downloads for last year. If they stopped seven episodes in, they would never have gotten to that point. And they got to the point that they are in because at some point in the process, they pivoted until they found a format that they liked, and they just kept doing it because they love the format. And so,
Mm,
you know, podcasting is not for everybody's. So I would say take your 7 episodes, do it, see if you feel it, see if you love it. If you like the process but something just doesn't feel comfortable, pivot. And 'cause I pivoted several times when I was doing my podcast. My podcast was called The Transformation Blueprint, but there's a
mhm.
podcast I had called Time to Freedom and all these other things that I was doing at the time that nothing ever came of it. You'll never see an episode of that. But I pivoted until I found something that I really liked that I could stick with, and I just kept doing it. And so that's what I'd say to
Mm.
people: like you have to fall in love with the process, and if you don't love the process, get out now because it's going to be a very brutal journey to keep going on something that you don't love. But if you do go through with it, the results and the personal fulfillment you get from it will be something you've never experienced before, and you're going to be so addicted to it.
That's true. That's true. It's hard, it's rough, but the rewards are immense.
Yeah.
The rewards are immense. And I like that you're scaring away the people who just fly by night.
Yeah,
It's-
yeah. Because I mean, I can tell you, like, for my clients, for them to go somewhere and be identified on the street is not uncommon for them. And for them to be approached by publishers to have a book published, because they have built up an audience of people who love them, is not uncommon. For them to be invited or to be in the same league with people who were their idols in the business coming up is not uncommon to them. For people who can say to them, I was randomly on a webinar about someone talking about here's how to make a successful podcast or whatever, and she was like, these are the top people in my niche in the podcast space, and one of the people that she's mentioning was my client. It's just like that's something that you can experience, but just through the process of like falling in love with it and keeping going, iterating each time, getting better at it, and having a strong team and putting a lot of effort into the work that you're doing.
yeah, very important. That's good. That's good. That's good encouragement for people who are thinking about starting and haven't just kind of crossed over the line as yet. Maybe this might be their clarion call to do something about it. And that's a good segue because I wanna kind of focus on one thing that you said and in our discussions before you pointed this out that now is the time to start because saturation is coming.
Mhm.
Why do you think that saturation is coming, and why should someone start now?
Yeah. So the podcast. So why is the saturation is coming? Like this is the best time to do it because literally last year, just literally last year, is when YouTube rolled out podcasting on their platform. Literally last year, like this is the starting point for a lot of podcasters. And right now, the market has a lot of celebrities on the space, and people, and like celebrities, influencers are taking it seriously. But soon, business people are gonna be starting to take advantage of it, and we're seeing that now. So you really now is really the best time to get onto the platform, make your mistakes, find your audience, and build your moat around your work. Just have that, but time and attention in the market. Start putting your content out there before the newcomers come in who are not the early adopters, who know the people who are going to come down don't hear this and they wait a few more years and come in, they're going to be looking at you and saying, "Boy, I can't catch up." Like they've already cornered the market. They're already doing everything. They're already putting out so much great content. They already have all the views. They already have my target audience because you started now and you did all the stuff in the shadows to make all the mistakes and then come out in public much larger and with an audience ready to listen to your message.
So you mentioned YouTube. Can we talk about YouTube a little bit? I know you started doing video podcasts last year, and I suspect that your main platform for video podcasts is YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So maybe we could talk about YouTube a little bit because I'm curious to find out about how this works. So I know YouTube, well, Google, the company, maybe Alphabet, I don't know how high up they go. They are sunsetting, or maybe they have sunsetted Google Podcasts. Is that true?
That's true. Yeah.
Okay, so does that mean they'll not be adding any more new podcasts to the platform?
They won't be adding new podcasts to Google Podcasts, but if you have YouTube Music, or if you pay for YouTube Premium, you can listen to podcasts on YouTube directly on YouTube. But that's separate and apart from you being able to just watch podcasts on YouTube. And why I think YouTube is going to be a game changer for podcast online, and what we're seeing today is all the things that you get with YouTube currently apply to podcasts now. So
Hmm.
very robust analytics, a very strong algorithm that literally is there to serve you and serve your content. A lot of people talk about, oh, YouTube, the algorithm works against them, but it doesn't. YouTube's main goal is to get people to spend time on their platform. And if your podcast gets people to spend 2 hours or 3 hours or 1 hour on their platform, your podcast is going to get all the views from YouTube. That's just how the algorithm works. So, how can you get attention? And this is why I love the YouTube video podcast more than I love more than the standard audio podcast, is because you can now use a thumbnail, which is just like the little image that people use to find your video. You can use a title, you can use the description, and get so much more discoverability for your podcast. Because right now, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., aren't very discoverable for podcasts. And so you have to rely on strong SEO, Apple SEO, Spotify SEO, Google SEO to get stuff to get listeners for your podcast. Now with YouTube, you can use the thumbnail, title, description to get listeners for your podcast. You can create chapters for your podcast, and in those chapters, if they're SEO friendly, will get picked up in Google and get shown at the top of search results. So
Hmm.
there's literally an endless no possibility for your podcast to be discovered if you're taking
Hmm.
advantage of it the right way. So for
Hmm.
me, when I work on my clients' videos, if I make a thumbnail and a title and I put it out there, if the first hour has passed and hasn't gotten good views, I'm changing the thumbnail and title. And I'm doing that every hour on the hour until I feel comfortable, or until I see the trend, the rising trend of the podcast starting to go up and to the right. So no, okay, we're on a good path. This video is gonna get views. And sometimes there's some videos that don't get views for 6 months, but then all of a sudden it just skyrockets, gets 10,000 views like in the next 90 days. Like, and what I want people to see is what's the advantage of all of that, right? When someone watches your video and they love what you're doing and they have the description on the bottom and they scroll down and see, hey, come to my free masterclass, or get my book, or get this freebie that I have for you, they now click that and they enter your funnel. And the better you are at making content, the more likely you'll have people to respond to that call to action and becoming clients. That is the end game. That is why I do all that I do. Is I mean, I'm not. I'm focusing on views, but at the end of the day, the views drives the calls to action, which drives the purchases, and that's what that's where I think all the greatness is. So you take that video, take the audio, put it on Spotify, Apple, everything. You put the video on YouTube, create title and thumbnail, add chapters, then make clips for that video and put it on Instagram, put it on LinkedIn, put it on TikTok, everywhere. And it all works. That one video all works as an ecosystem. And then you take that video again, you embed it onto your website, you add your show notes you add your blog post show notes. And then you have Google working for you, you have YouTube working for you, you have Instagram working for you, TikTok working for you, your website, Spotify, Apple, like LinkedIn, all working for you. And
Right.
we're experimenting with Twitter as well, but we don't have anything to share yet. We're still experimenting. I don't have any confidence from conviction about Twitter yet, but it's coming.
Oh, that's good. That's a really good synopsis and breakdown of how you can do much more if you approach it not just from let me just put it one place, but let me take this core piece of content and then use it across all these relevant marketing channels. But start in video, and particularly for you, it start in on YouTube because that is the place for video podcast right now.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you have to do anything special when it comes to that, or is a podcast video just like a regular YouTube video?
You can create a podcast on YouTube. And there's a whole section for it. And then you can add videos. It basically creates a playlist on YouTube. And then you add the videos as you create them to that podcast playlist. But it's tagged as a podcast. So there's a whole section now called youtube.com/podcasts, which only shows podcasts. And so, if you're logged in, if you're a member of that target audience, YouTube's going to serve that content to you. So if you go to podcast and you're into that type of content, you're going to see the podcasts that are being created by the people who want to reach you.
That's good. That's excellent. So we have to remember to put it in that section if we wanted to get recognized as an actual podcast.
That's right.
That's good information because from what you described earlier, it seems that some of the ways in which you treat with a podcast is very similar to a regular YouTube video. Like for example, you were describing using the like testing thumbnails and testing titles until it hits, and that's something that any seasoned YouTuber would do. They would test thumbnails, they'll A/B test them and see which one picks up. And then when it starts to pick up, they say, okay, well, that's probably the one. And so you'd often see, if you look at a video that's just released, you'd see one thumbnail and maybe you come back in 15 minutes and there's a different thumbnail. But you're saying put it in the podcast section, but treat it like a YouTube video and you should get results.
That's right. And it creates this feedback loop. So why analytics is so powerful, it creates this feedback loop. Because now, you say you found a winning format for your video, it's going out, there's getting tens of thousands of views. You can now take that title and update Spotify. And now Spotify is going to get more downloads because now people are now resonating with that title more because of how well it did on YouTube. It creates a good feedback loop as well.
Right. Excellent. That's good. That's good stuff. I'm so happy about how you framed everything, moving us from why a business should have a podcast all the way down to the nitty-gritty details of video podcasting and how that applies to YouTube. Are there any final things that you would love to share with the people in terms of getting their video podcast up and running?
Yeah. So look at what other people are doing in the space. So you want to identify one, who's in your space and performing at a high level, meaning that they're getting views, they're getting subscribers. What are they doing? How are they creating thumbnails for their videos? And use that as inspiration. You can also take a look at search. Like, say for example, you're doing an episode about changing wheel bearings on your bicycle or something. You can do a search on YouTube and see what comes up, and use the top results, the ones that get the most views, as inspiration for your thumbnails as well. When you're just starting out, you're gonna be playing a different game from the people who are currently champions. So you look at like Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett or Joe Rogan podcast or Human Lab. They can just put their faces on the thumbnail and it's gonna get views. You don't have the same luxury because no one's gonna click on your face in a thumbnail because they don't know anything about you. So you have to play a different game starting out. You want one thing that we've tested out and we found out what works. We look at retention graphs and we found that your first 30 seconds really impacts how long people watch the video. If you can get people through your first 30 seconds, they're going to watch your video for much longer than if you didn't give them something that grabs their attention in the first 30 seconds. So really think about, can you do a clip from the podcast itself that captures an engaging moment Can you put that at the beginning so that they watch that, be like, okay, now I want to know what the show is about. That's something that we've tested and we've found. So hit your first 30 seconds with a clip or excerpt or intro of some kind. Then you want to hit them with something about your podcast. No more than 3 seconds. Maybe you want to flash your logo up or something, but no more than 3 seconds. And then get into the main content of your episode. Don't do too much preamble and back and forth banter. You can do that. You can keep that for the audio part of the podcast, but for the video part of the podcast, when you're just starting out, you really are competing on value more than personality. There is enough time in the future to deliver on personality. And as people listen, you want to deliver personality. But when you're just starting out, you want to hit them immediately with value. So 30-second clip of an interesting episode or intro, 3-second thing about your show, and then jump into the main content, deliver value right away. And do that for a number of episodes, and you're gonna start to see comments come in, and you're gonna start to see likes go up. You're gonna start to see subscribers go up. Those would be your key lead indicators that you're on the right path. And that's something that you again, that's something that you just don't get with audio podcasts. You might see the numbers go up, but you don't see likes, comments, shares, any of that stuff. So we use other tools like YouTube analytics, like Instagram analytics and TikTok and YouTube Shorts analytics to see if we're on the right track.
That's great. That's great. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paul, for sharing with us today how and why businesses should start a video podcast, and for going so much into detail at the end there about how it applies to YouTube and some of the things that they should do. I appreciate it. So people might be interested in getting in contact with you. Could you please share with the people how they can find you online?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Paul Stennett Live. That's PaulStennett Live. Or you can go to listenerstoclients.com. That's my website. You get all the information there as well.
So thank you so much, students, for joining us in the Useful Content Classroom. And I hope you got great value from what we shared today. Useful Content Classroom. Dismissed.